Commander Vex Korath clicked his mandibles in what could only be described as supreme annoyance. The sound echoed through the Academy's observation deck like claws scratching against metal. Below them, the newest batch of interspecies military cadets assembled for orientation, and among them stood the humans. "Oh, wonderful," Vex muttered, his translator struggling with the sarcasm. "More Earth spawn." Lieutenant Zara 9, a Centaurian with eyes like liquid mercury, flicked her antenna dismissively. "I hear this batch includes some supposedly gifted specimen. Marcus Kane, I believe his name was." "Kane?" Vex's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. "Let me guess. Another human who thinks their species conquered their own planet through sheer determination rather than dumb luck and reproductive excess." The object of their conversation stood casually among his fellow cadets, hands shoved deep into his regulation uniform pockets. Marcus Kane appeared utterly ordinary by human standards. Brown hair that defied military regulations by existing at the maximum allowable length, average height, and a face that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. What made him particularly infuriating to observe was his posture. While other cadets, both human and alien, stood at rigid attention, Marcus slouched like he was waiting for a transport shuttle rather than beginning the most prestigious military training program in known space. "Attention, cadets," boomed Drill Sergeant Thek Molran, whose voice could probably shatter crystalline formations on 3 different worlds. The massive Corvin's 4 arms gestured expansively as he addressed the assembly. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy, where we separate the warriors from the waste of oxygen." Marcus yawned. Actually yawned. In the observation deck, Vex's mandibles clicked faster. Did that little primate just— "He did," Zara 9 confirmed, her mercury eyes widening. "Either he's incredibly brave or phenomenally stupid. With humans, those tend to be the same thing," Vex replied dryly. Below, Sergeant Thek Molran's 6 eyes had all focused on Marcus with the intensity of targeting lasers. "Cadet Kane, did I just witness you expressing boredom during my welcome speech?" Marcus looked up, and for the first time opened his eyes fully. They were an unremarkable brown, but there was something in them that made even the observers 2 levels up pay attention. "No, Sergeant," Marcus replied, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard despite not raising it. "I was just wondering when we'd get past the theatrical intimidation and start with actual training." The silence that followed was so complete that Vex swore he could hear his own circulatory fluid pumping. "Theatrical intimidation?" Thek Molran's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow seemed louder than his previous roar. "Cadet, you have exactly 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't have you scrubbing waste recyclers until the heat death of the universe." Marcus shrugged, and the casual gesture seemed to radiate confidence rather than disrespect. "Because you need me to pass your trials, and we both know it." Vex nearly fell off his observation perch. Did he just— "Challenge a drill sergeant on day 1, Zara 9 finished, her antenna twitching with what might have been amusement. "This is either going to be spectacular or catastrophically embarrassing for his entire species." Thek Molran's laugh was like boulders grinding together. "Oh, cadet, you've just volunteered for special attention. Everyone, combat assessment begins now. Kane, you're first." The training ground transformed with mechanical efficiency. Platforms rose from the floor, obstacle courses deployed from hidden compartments, and holographic targets materialized throughout the space. It was designed to test every aspect of a cadet's abilities: speed, strength, agility, tactical thinking, and most importantly, the ability to function under pressure. Marcus walked to the starting line with the same casual pace he'd maintained since arrival. Other cadets whispered among themselves, some human voices expressing concern for their fellow Earthling, while alien cadets made sounds that probably translated to various forms of anticipated entertainment. "Standard Combat Assessment," Thek Mulran announced. "Navigate the course, neutralize all targets, reach the extraction point. Time limit, 15 minutes. Failure means immediate dismissal from the program." Marcus nodded, and then did something that made every observer, both in the courtyard and the observation deck, question their understanding of human psychology. He closed his eyes. "What is he doing?" Vex hissed. "I have no idea," Zara 9 admitted, her usually confident demeanor showing cracks. "Humans don't have echolocation or enhanced spatial awareness. This is suicide." "Begin!" Thek Mulran roared. Marcus moved, but calling it movement was like calling a supernova a bright light. He flowed through the course with his eyes still closed, each step placed with precision that defied explanation. The first obstacle was a series of laser barriers that required careful timing to pass through. Most cadets studied the pattern for several seconds before attempting passage. Marcus simply walked through them, not around them, not under them, not over them, through them, as if he'd memorized their sequence before they'd even activated. His timing was so perfect that he never broke stride, laser beams missing him by millimeters as he maintained his casual pace. "That's not possible," Vex whispered. The next section featured combat drones, holographic enemies that required split-second reflexes to defeat. Standard protocol involved taking cover, assessing threats, and engaging with precise movements. Marcus never opened his eyes. Instead, he moved like he was performing some kind of elaborate dance. His body twisted and turned, hands moving in precise arcs that somehow always intercepted drone attacks at exactly the right angle to redirect their energy back at them. Within 30 seconds, all 12 drones were neutralized, and Marcus hadn't even drawn the energy weapon from his holster. "He's using their own attacks against them," Zara 9 breathed. "But how can he know where they are without looking?" Vex finished. "Unless—" The final section was the real test. A three-dimensional maze filled with moving platforms, rotating obstacles, and multiple paths to the extraction point. The fastest recorded completion time was 4 minutes and 37 seconds, set by a Rigelian whose species had natural wall-climbing abilities. Marcus entered the maze and promptly sat down. "What's he doing now?" several cadets called out. For 30 seconds, Marcus remained perfectly still, sitting cross-legged at the maze entrance with his eyes closed. Then he stood up, stretched once, and began moving through the maze like he'd built it himself. Every turn was perfect. Every jump landed precisely where it needed to. Every rotating obstacle was bypassed with timing so accurate it seemed choreographed. He moved through 3 dimensions as if gravity was merely a suggestion, using walls, ceilings, and moving platforms with equal ease. 2 minutes and 18 seconds after entering the maze, Marcus Kane walked out of the extraction point, opened his eyes, and looked directly at Drill Sergeant Thek Mulran. "Was there supposed to be more to it?" he asked. The courtyard erupted in chaos. Cadets from a dozen different species were talking, shouting, or making their species equivalent of excited sounds. In the observation deck, Vex and Zara 9 stared in stunned silence. "That," Vex said finally, "was either the most impressive display of combat prowess I've ever witnessed, or the most elaborate case of dumb luck in galactic history." "With humans," Zara 9 replied, unconsciously echoing Vex's earlier comment. Those might be the same thing. Thekmolran approached Marcus, his massive frame casting a shadow that could have housed a small transport ship. "Cadet Kane," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Would you mind explaining how you accomplished that?" Marcus shrugged again, that same casual gesture that seemed to contain multitudes. "You really want to know? Humor me." I listened. "You listened?" "Everything makes sound, Sergeant. Laser barriers hum at different frequencies depending on their power settings. Combat drones have microservos that whine when they're about to change direction. Moving platforms in mazes create air currents that follow predictable patterns." Thekmolran's 6 eyes narrowed. "And the combat reflexes?" "My species spent most of our evolution being hunted by things bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We got good at redirecting force rather than meeting it head-on. Basic physics, really." "Basic physics," Thekmolran repeated slowly. "Plus," Marcus added with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from him, "you designed this course to test individual abilities in isolation. Speed, strength, agility, thinking, pressure response. But you never tested for the one thing humans actually excel at, which is cheating." The word hung in the air like an unexploded ordnance. "I beg your pardon?" Thekmolran's voice carried the promise of immediate and painful consequences. "Not rule-breaking," Marcus clarified quickly. "Creative problem-solving. You see, every other species here is trying to beat your course the way you designed it to be beaten. But humans? We look at arbitrary limitations as starting suggestions." Vex found himself leaning forward despite his determination to remain unimpressed. "What's he getting at?" "You set up obstacles that test specific skills," Marcus continued, warming to his topic. "But the real world doesn't care about your skill categories. In actual combat, the soldier who survives isn't the one who's strongest or fastest. It's the one who figures out how to make the environment work for them instead of against them. So you closed your eyes because vision makes you overconfident. You see an obstacle, you immediately start planning how to overcome it with force or speed or agility. But if you can't see it, you have to understand it. And once you understand it, you can use it." Thekmolran was quiet for a long moment. Then he began to laugh, that boulder grinding sound that had intimidated countless cadets over the years. "Cadet Kane," he said finally, "you've just earned yourself a new designation." "Which is?" "Special Projects. Congratulations. You're now everyone else's problem, too." As the other cadets were dismissed for standard orientation procedures, Marcus remained behind with Thekmolran. In the observation deck, Vex and Zara 9 continued their vigil. "I don't like this," Vex muttered. "Humans are unpredictable enough when they're following standard protocols." "What do you think Special Projects means?" Zara 9 asked. "With humans? Probably something that will give me stress molting." Below them, Thekmolran was speaking quietly with Marcus, occasionally gesturing toward different sections of the now empty training ground. "There's something else," the sergeant was saying. "The course you just completed?" "It wasn't the standard assessment." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "No. It was the Advanced Instructor Qualification Exam. We use it to test experienced officers for promotion to training positions." "Huh. Did I pass?" "You set a new record. By 3 minutes." "Cool. So what happens now?" Thekmolran's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement rather than annoyance. "Now, Cadet Kane, you get to find out what we do with humans who exceed every parameter we have for measuring military potential. Which is, we throw impossible situations at you until we find your breaking point. Marcus grinned, and for the first time since his arrival, he looked genuinely excited. Finally, I was starting to think this place might be boring. In the observation deck, Vex made a sound that his species used to indicate impending doom. "Zara 9, he said slowly. "I think we're about to find out exactly how much trouble one human can cause in a military academy designed to train the galaxy's elite warriors. Should we warn someone? Warn them about what? That a human just treated our most difficult combat assessment like a warm-up exercise? That might be a good start." Vex looked down at Marcus Kane, who was now examining the deactivated laser barriers with obvious interest, poking at them with one finger while maintaining a conversation with a drill sergeant who could bench press a small spacecraft. "You know what the most terrifying part is," Vex said finally. "What?" "He's not even trying to show off. This is just how he approaches problems." "Then what happens when he actually does try?" The question hung between them as Marcus Kane, unremarkable human from an unremarkable planet, began his journey through the most elite military training program in the known galaxy. And in the back of Vex's mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps the humans weren't overrated after all. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous. The question hung between them as Marcus Kane, unremarkable human from an unremarkable planet, began his journey through the most elite military training program in the known galaxy. And in the back of Vex's mind, a small voice whispered that perhaps the humans weren't overrated after all. Perhaps they were something far more dangerous. Perhaps they were underestimated. 3 weeks later, Commander Vex Korath found himself in the Academy's medical bay, receiving treatment for what the doctors diplomatically called stress-induced exoskeleton fractures. The real cause, however, was banging his head against his desk every time he received another report about Cadet Marcus Kane. "Let me get this straight," Dr. Helix 7 said, her crystalline healing appendages working on Vex's cracked mandible. "You've been monitoring a single human cadet so intensively that you've literally damaged yourself." "You haven't seen what he's been doing," Vex muttered, wincing as the doctor's work sent healing vibrations through his skull. "Enlighten me." Vex activated his personal data pad, scrolling through weeks of incident reports. Week 1. Advanced Tactical Simulation. The scenario: defend a space station against overwhelming enemy forces. Standard approach involves strategic positioning, resource management, and coordinated defensive patterns. Sounds reasonable. Kane hacked into the station's environmental systems and vented atmosphere from sections where enemy boarding parties were predicted to land. Then he rerouted emergency lighting to create a disco ball effect that disoriented their targeting systems while simultaneously playing what he called Earth music at volumes that interfered with their communication frequencies. Dr. Helix 7 paused her work. Did it work? He achieved a 97% casualty rate against the simulated enemies. The previous record was 43%. Impressive. The music was something called Baby Shark. The doctor's healing appendages trembled slightly. Oh my. Vex continued scrolling. Week 2. Survival training on Kepler 7. The death world with predators that can phase through solid matter. Standard protocol involves building defensive positions and waiting for extraction. Logical approach. Kane befriended the predators. Excuse me? Apparently, the phasing ability requires enormous energy expenditure. So he figured out what they ate, learned their hunting patterns, and started helping them catch prey more efficiently. In exchange, they protected him from other environmental hazards. That's actually brilliant strategic thinking. He taught them poker. What's poker? I have no idea, but according to his final report, he left the planet with 17 IOUs from apex predators who apparently owe him favors. Dr. Helix 7 set down her instruments. "Vex, are you telling me this human turned a survival exercise into a networking opportunity?" It gets worse. Week 3 was psychological warfare resistance training. The mental conditioning program? That's designed to break even veteran operatives. The interrogation specialists reported complete failure after 6 hours. He broke? Number. He turned the session into what he called group therapy. By the end, the interrogators were discussing their childhood trauma and career dissatisfaction. 2 of them have requested transfers to the counseling division. Dr. Helix 7 sat down heavily, her crystalline form refracting light in confused patterns. "Vex, I think your human might be insane? Dangerous? A threat to ordered military hierarchy?" Extraordinary. Before Vex could respond, his communicator chirped with an emergency signal. The voice of Academy Commandant Thex Omega filled the medical bay with barely controlled panic. "All senior staff to the main tactical center immediately. We have a situation with the human." Vex and Dr. Helix 7 exchanged glances and rushed toward the tactical center, where they found chaos in full swing. Multiple holographic displays showed various sections of the Academy, all focused on a single figure, moving through what appeared to be the ultimate challenge course. "Status report," Vex demanded. Lieutenant Zara 9 turned from a control console, her mercury eyes wide with something between terror and admiration. Kane requested permission to attempt the Omega Protocol. The Omega ... Vex's voice trailed off. "That's not a training exercise. That's a theoretical impossibility designed to test our security systems." He said, and I quote, "It looked fun." On the main display, Marcus Kane was navigating through the Academy's most classified testing facility. The Omega Protocol combined every challenge the institution could devise: shifting gravity fields, hostile artificial intelligences, adaptive defense systems, temporal distortion fields, and automated weapons platforms that learned from each encounter. It was designed to be unbeatable. Marcus was treating it like an amusement park. "How long has he been in there?" Vex asked. 4 hours, 17 minutes, Commandant Thex Omega replied, all 6 of his arms gesturing helplessly at the displays. The estimated survival time for any individual was 12 minutes. "What's his approach?" "That's the problem. He doesn't have one. He keeps changing tactics every few minutes, like he's experimenting." On screen, Marcus encountered a room full of laser grids that reconfigured themselves based on his movement patterns. Instead of trying to navigate through them, he sat down in the center and pulled out what appeared to be a small Earth instrument. "Is that a harmonica?" Dr. Helix 7 asked. "I believe so," Zara 9 confirmed. Marcus began playing a simple melody, and something impossible happened. The laser grids began pulsing in rhythm with the music, their deadly precision turning into an elaborate light show. "The harmonics are interfacing with the grid's frequency modulators," a technician reported. He's making them dance." "That should not be possible," Commandant Thex Omega stated flatly. "Someone should tell Kane that," Vex muttered. The next room contained the Academy's prototype artificial intelligence, designed to be the ultimate strategic opponent. It had defeated every challenger, often within minutes. Marcus walked in, looked around, and started talking to the ceiling. "Hello there. Nice place you've got here. Very minimalist. I'm Marcus. What's your name?" The AI's response was transmitted through the speakers. "I am Aegis Prime, designed to eliminate all intruders through superior tactical analysis and adaptive countermeasures. Cool. Want to play 20 questions? I do not understand the parameters of this engagement. I think of something. You ask yes or no questions to figure out what it is. If you guess within 20 questions, you win. This is not a recognized combat scenario. Exactly. That's what makes it interesting. What followed was the strangest 20 minutes in Academy history. Marcus and the artificial intelligence engaged in increasingly complex rounds of 20 questions, with the AI becoming progressively more invested in the game. By the end, Aegis Prime was asking questions like, "Does it make you happy?" and "Would I like it if I could experience preference?" Aegis Prime has requested to join Cadet Kane for lunch, a stunned technician reported. The AI wants to have lunch. Commandant Thex Omega asked. It also wants to know if Kane has any other fun human games. The final chamber was the Academy's ultimate test, a perfect replica of the most challenging military scenario in recent galactic history, the Siege of Proxima Station. It had required a full battle fleet and the sacrifice of thousands of lives to achieve victory. Marcus was supposed to command a single ship against overwhelming odds. Instead, he opened communications with the enemy fleet. "Attention, hostile forces!" His voice carried across all frequencies. "This is Commander Kane of the, let me check. Okay, the UES Tiny but Determined. I have a proposition for you." The simulated enemy commander responded, "Surrender now and your death will be swift." "Thanks, but I've got a better idea. How about we settle this with a dance-off?" The tactical center fell silent. "A what?" the enemy commander asked. "Dance-off. Your best dancer versus mine. Winner takes the station. Loser goes home. No casualties, no resource expenditure, no traumatized families." This is not how warfare functions. Yeah, but think about it. Your soldiers signed up to fight for whatever cause you represent, right? If you can achieve the same strategic objective without risking their lives, isn't that better leadership? There was a long pause. Then, you would stake everything on a single contest? Why not? Warfare is basically just complex competition anyway. This just cuts out the middleman. What followed was the most surreal military engagement in Academy records. The simulation continued, as Marcus somehow convinced both sides to participate in what became an elaborate cultural exchange. By the end, former enemies were teaching each other traditional dances, sharing food, and discussing philosophical differences. The exercise concluded with both fleets joining forces to establish a joint research station. He turned a military simulation into a diplomatic summit, Vex whispered. Complete with a cultural festival, Zara 9 added. Marcus emerged from the Omega Protocol facility, looking slightly rumpled, but otherwise unharmed. He approached the observation window where the entire senior staff was staring at him in stunned silence. "That was awesome!" he called out, his voice carrying through the intercom. "Can we do it again tomorrow?" Commandant Thex Omega stepped forward, all 6 arms folded in what every species recognized as serious contemplation. "Cadet Kane," he said slowly, "in 3 weeks, you have redefined every parameter we use to measure military effectiveness. You have turned combat into cooperation, strategy into entertainment, and warfare into diplomacy. Is that bad? No, Kane, it's revolutionary." The Commandant paused, looking around at his staff. Which brings us to a problem. You see, this academy exists to train military officers for conventional scenarios. But what you've demonstrated suggests that conventional thinking itself might be the limitation. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Yeah, I noticed that. Your training is really good at preparing people to fight the last war, but not so much for preventing the next one. Precisely. So we have a choice. We can either try to force you to conform to our existing standards, or we can redesign our standards around what you've taught us. Vex felt his mandibles clicking in what he realized was excitement rather than annoyance. You're talking about a complete overhaul of military doctrine based on the observations of a single human? Not just any human, Commandant Thex Omega replied. A human who just solved every impossible scenario we could devise, and did it by refusing to accept that they were impossible. Marcus grinned. So, what happens now? Now, Kane, you become an instructor, not a cadet, an instructor. Your first assignment is to teach other species how to think like humans. All humans? Or just the weird ones like me? Is there a difference? Marcus considered this seriously. Not really. We're all pretty weird when you get down to it. 6 months later, Commander Vex Korath found himself in the unusual position of requesting assignment to what was now called the Alternative Strategic Thinking Program. The curriculum, developed by instructor Marcus Kane, had become the most sought-after training in the galaxy. I still don't understand how he does it, Vex confided to Dr. Helix 7 during one of their regular conversations. Maybe that's the point, she replied. Perhaps the secret isn't understanding how he thinks differently, but learning to think differently yourself. Is that what you're doing? I've enrolled in his next seminar, Creative Problem Solving for Non-Humans. Apparently, we're going to learn something called improv comedy. What's that? I have absolutely no idea. But after watching Kane turn our most challenging scenarios into collaborative successes, I figure it's worth finding out. Vex nodded, looking out at the training grounds where mixed groups of humans and aliens were engaged in exercises that looked more like games than military drills, but somehow produced better coordinated teams than traditional methods. You know what the strangest part is? He mused. What's that? We spent so much time thinking humans were overrated because they seemed ordinary. Turns out, being ordinary was never their limitation. What was? Our imagination. Below them, Marcus Kane was teaching a class of elite warriors from 12 different species how to play something called charades. The sound of universal laughter filled the training ground as a massive Corvan warrior attempted to mime Butterfly, while his teammates shouted increasingly ridiculous guesses. It should have been absurd. Instead, it was working. Somehow, Marcus Kane had taken the galaxy's most serious military institution and taught it that the best way to prepare for war might be to remember how to play. And the terrifying part was, everyone was becoming better soldiers because of it. Commander Vex, Dr. Helix 7 said thoughtfully, I think we owe the humans an apology. For what? For assuming that just because they make everything look easy, it actually is. Vex watched as Marcus high-fived a successful student, his enthusiasm genuine and infectious. You're right, he said finally. They don't make it look easy because they're showing off. No? They make it look easy because they've figured out that most problems become simpler when you stop making them complicated. And in that moment, as the sound of interspecies laughter echoed through the academy, Commander Vex Korath finally understood why Earth had never been conquered despite being surrounded by more advanced civilizations. It wasn't because humans were the strongest, or the smartest, or the most technologically advanced. It was because they were the only species that had figured out how to have fun while saving the galaxy. And that, it turned out, was the most dangerous ability of all.